At a time when computers were just beginning to be understood, one animator dreamed of a digital world hidden beneath the surface of our own. This is the journey of Steven Lisberger, the creator of Tron, a film misunderstood in its time, but one that ultimately became one of the most influential in cinema history. From his early animation experiments and a failed Olympic short, to the groundbreaking production of Tron, its legacy in film, its hidden secrets, the chronology of this universe, and its lasting impact on the industry, we'll explore everything surrounding this visionary. Because behind the glow of the circuits lies a human story, creative, bold, and far ahead of its time. Welcome to the world behind Tron. The man before the grid. Before the world knew what it meant to step into a digital universe, Steven Lisberger was already dreaming of invisible worlds. Born in 1951 and trained at the School of the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, Lisberger emerged in the 1970s as an experimental animator. His psychedelic short cosmic cartoon led him to found his own company, Lisberger Studios. Where he began blending traditional animation with the electronic aesthetics of an era just starting to take shape. One of his first ambitious projects was Animal Impics, an animated satire of the Olympic Games, originally planned as 2 television specials, one for the Winter Games and one for the summer. But then the unthinkable happened. In 1980, the United States boycotted the Moscow Olympics, and with them, the second half of Animal Impics was canceled. The project was reduced to a single feature film. Over time, it gained cult status, but it also marked a turning point in Lisberger's career. The origin of Tron, Disney's gamble. Inspired by the vector graphics of early arcade games, especially Pong, Lisberger had a bold vision. What if a human could actually enter a computer? That idea gave birth to Tron. Selling the script was no easy task. Studios like Warner Brothers, MGM, and Universal all turned it down. But Disney, at the time trying to reinvent itself during a slump in creativity and box office performance, took interest. It was a risk, but also a leap toward the future. Ironically, the studio would later distance itself from the project. But thanks to passionate fans, Tron was never forgotten. The concept was revolutionary, combining live-action actors, computer-generated animation, digitally created backgrounds, and traditional rotoscoping. At a time when 3D rendering didn't even exist, Tron became the first feature film to use extensive CGI, computer-generated imagery. The film was shot on black sets, with actors wearing white suits and glowing lines added by hand, frame by frame, over many months. It was science fiction cinema made with experimental tools, more lab than studio. Why would a traditionally conservative company like Disney greenlight such a bold project? There were several reasons. The company was struggling with its identity, and its box office performance had declined, especially compared to competitors like Warner and Universal. At the time, Ron W. Miller was Disney's CEO. Many saw his rise as more of a family favor. He was married to Walt Disney's only daughter, Diane Disney. Still, it was Miller who approved the Tron script after being impressed by a computer-animated concept trailer created by Lisberger as a proof of concept. Though the budget was modest by modern standards, $17 million, it was considered substantial at the time. For context, the year's biggest hit, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, had a production cost of just $10 million. This made Disney's bet even riskier than it may seem today. It's important to understand that Walt Disney's death in 1966 had left a creative void in the company. When we talk about a loss of identity, consider that the two films Disney released just before Tron were Night Crossing and Condorman, both critical and commercial failures. In fact, during the entire previous decade, Disney's only standout animated successes had been The Rescuers and The Fox and the Hound.
This is a job for Condor Man!
The computers behind Tron. In 1982, computers were nowhere near powerful. CGI wasn't even an industry yet. The studios used machines with just 2 megabytes of RAM and a hard drive of only 330 megabytes, barely enough today to load a single web image. To achieve the computer-generated scenes, the production enlisted 4 different companies: MAGI, Mathematical Applications, Group Inc., Information International Incorporated, Robert Abel and Associates, and Digital Effects Incorporated, each specialized in a different area: motion simulation, modeling, vector animation, glow effects, and geometric rendering. The 3D images were built with vector modeling, no textures, no realistic lighting. Each frame took hours to render, and many were drawn directly using mathematical coordinates, line by line. Director Steven Lisberger had to guide actors without any view of the digital world around them. The sets were completely empty. The environments, ships, cities, everything was added months later in post-production. It was like acting inside a dream with no visual references. Jeff Bridges famously described it as like doing theater in outer space with no set.
To wear colorful clothes, because it was all black and our suits were all black and white, but you'd go outside after days of working and being in that just black and white atmosphere, and boom, color would just rush into you.
The architects of the system. How do you design the future? One of the most influential names was Syd Mead, an industrial designer and concept artist famous for envisioning the future with uncanny accuracy. His role in Tron was as important as H.R. Giger's in Alien. He had already worked on Star Trek and Blade Runner, and would later contribute to Aliens, Time Cop, Short Circuit, and Mission Impossible 3. In his 1976 book, Sentinel, Mead imagined futuristic vehicles that closely resemble today's designs, long before they were possible. Trained as a product designer for companies like Ford and Philips, he brought that realism to the digital world of Tron, giving its objects a functional, believable look, even within a computer. Another visionary brought on board was legendary French artist Jean Giraud, better known as Moebius. Renowned for his sci-fi comics and conceptual work on Alien and The Fifth Element, Moebius contributed a fluid, organic, dreamlike style that contrasted sharply with Mead's technical precision. The result was a stunning blend: cold geometric forms meeting stylized human silhouettes. A visual universe like nothing ever seen before. For certain animation sequences, production designer Ronald Kushner revealed that they attempted to recruit artists from Disney's own animation department, but were met with a cold shoulder. No one came to help. Ironically, they ended up outsourcing to Wang Film Productions, a studio closely affiliated with Warner Brothers. Tron was originally a comedy. When Steven Lisberger first began developing Tron in the late 70s, his original vision had a much lighter, more playful tone, influenced by the rise of arcade games, psychedelic animation, and his own background in animated comedy. Early drafts of the script portrayed Tron as an adventure comedy set inside a video game, with absurd scenarios and a satirical take on corporate and tech culture. Disney, having acquired the rights, initially wanted something more family-friendly, but as the script evolved, it took on a darker, more serious tone, focusing on themes like digital identity, free will, rebellion against corporate control, and the blurred line between users and programs. Robin Williams was even considered early on for the lead role, but ultimately they chose Jeff Bridges, who brought just the right mix of gravitas and youthful charisma to ground the film's increasingly complex ideas. The clash with the real world. The world simply wasn't ready for CGI. Tron suffered from a disastrous release schedule. Originally planned for a Christmas debut, poor executive decisions pushed the premiere to July 1982, just 2 weeks after the phenomenon of Spielberg's E.T. It also had to compete directly with titles like Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, and Blade Runner. Comparisons were inevitable, and Tron lost the box office battle. Critics called it cold, overly technical. Even the Academy snubbed it for Best Visual Effects, claiming that using computers was cheating. And that year, E.T. swept the awards.
The winners are Robert Knudsen, Robert Glass, Don Girolamo, Gene Cantamesa for E.T. the Extraterrestrial.
The invisible sequels. Although not an instant hit, Tron slowly became a cult classic. Its influence ran deep, not just in how it predicted virtual reality, artificial intelligence, and digital worlds, but also in how it inspired an entire generation of artists and tech pioneers. One of its animators, Chris Wedge, worked on the film's early digital tests. Years later, he would go on to found Blue Sky Studios, the team behind Ice Age, Robots, and Rio. That same studio was eventually acquired by Disney in 2019 and later shut down during the pandemic in 2021. The timeline of a digital universe. One major criticism of Tron Legacy was its underdeveloped plot. Despite its groundbreaking visuals, the film left audiences with more questions than answers, especially for a world with so much digital potential. What really happened to Kevin Flynn? What were the ISOs? How did Quora survive the genocide? Why is the character Tron barely featured in a film that bears his name? Many of those gaps were later filled in, not by films, but by expanded media. A 2-issue comic book miniseries, a video game prequel, and a 19-episode animated series. Together, these entries formed a much more complete picture of the Tron universe for dedicated fans. Tron. Kevin Flynn, a brilliant programmer and former employee of Encom, is on a mission to prove that his work was stolen by current executive Ed Dillinger. While attempting to hack into Encom from within, Flynn is digitized and transported into a virtual world by the powerful master control program MCP.
Who's that guy?
That's Tron. He fights for the users.
You believe in the users?
Inside the system, he meets Tron, a security program created by his friend Alan. Together, they fight against the tyrannical regime of the MCP. Flynn must survive deadly games and free the digital world from the inside using his unique combination of human ingenuity and programming skills. In the end, he defeats the MCP, escapes the grid, and returns to the real world with the evidence needed to regain control of ENCOM. Here, Clue was already created by Kevin Flynn and is not yet corrupted. In fact, he tries to defend his creator and is erased by the MCP at the beginning of the plot. Tron Betrayal, set in 1983, shortly after the events of Tron. Flynn is now CEO of ENCOM, the world's largest video game company. But secretly, he's building a new digital frontier, the grid. To help manage it, he creates Clue 2.0, a digital duplicate of himself programmed to maintain the perfect system. But in Flynn's growing absence, Clue sees the spontaneous, self-aware beings known as ISOs, isomorphic algorithms, as a threat. Clue orchestrates their extermination by banishing them to the sea of simulation, kidnaps Tron, and forces Flynn into exile. The comic also introduces Sam, Flynn's young son, destined to become the hero of the next film. Tron Uprising. The story follows Beck, a young mechanic in the city of Argonne, who witnesses the oppression of Clue's regime. He's secretly trained by a wounded but surviving Tron to become his successor. Assuming Tron's identity, Beck becomes a symbol of rebellion and leads covert resistance missions against General Tesler, one of Clue's most ruthless enforcers. As Beck hides his dual identity, he forms a complex connection with Paige, Tesler's second-in-command, loyal to the system but morally conflicted. The series tackles themes of identity, rebellion, and sacrifice, blending mature storytelling with a stylized visual aesthetic. Despite critical praise and high production quality, including voice work by Elijah Wood, Beck, Bruce Boxleitner, Tron, and Lance Henriksen, Tesler, in the series, we get a brief glimpse into Quorra's past as the sole surviving ISO, and how she was helped by Paige to escape. The reprogramming of Tron into Rinzler is also never developed, although it could have served as material for a second season. The series was canceled. Why? 3 key reasons. Internal shifts at Disney, which was focusing on big acquisitions like Lucasfilm. Diminished interest in the Tron brand following Legacy's lukewarm reception. Marketing confusion. The show's adult tone was at odds with its placement on a youth-focused network. Tron Evolution. This game fills major gaps in the lore. You play as Anon, a program created by Flynn to investigate a conspiracy inside the grid. Key plot events include the murder of Radia, leader of the ISOs, the mass purge and genocide of ISO programs, the confrontation between Clue, Tron, and Kevin Flynn. Anon ultimately sacrifices himself to allow Quorra to escape, explaining how she survives to appear in the next movie. Tron Legacy. Now the story follows Sam Flynn, Kevin's estranged son. When Alan Bradley receives a mysterious page from the old arcade, Sam investigates and is pulled into the grid. He's forced into deadly games and eventually meets Clue, now in full control of the digital realm. He also meets Quora, the last surviving ISO, and finally reunites with his father after 20 years. Together, they try to escape before Clue uses the portal to invade the real world. But Tron, once the system's protector, has been reprogrammed into Clue's enforcer, Rinzler. In the end, Kevin sacrifices himself to destroy Clue, allowing Sam and Quora to return to reality. The film explores free will, digital identity, and father-son relationships, all within a stunning visual world backed by Daft Punk's iconic soundtrack. When it premiered, many didn't realize it was a sequel to the 1982 film, nearly 30 years later. But the film's updated effects and respect for the original's design helped reintroduce Tron to a new generation. Tron: The Next Day. Included as a bonus on the Tron Legacy Blu-ray, this short acts as an epilogue. Alan Bradley has become the new CEO of Encom, while a digital activist group called Flynn Lives continues spreading the truth about the grid and Kevin Flynn's disappearance. The short suggests that Tron may have survived, raising questions about his true fate. It spans different eras leading up to Tron Legacy, showing how Kevin Flynn's disappearance impacted the fans, and how Sam was constantly sabotaging his own company, Uncom, through various acts. A key nod for longtime viewers is the appearance of a mysterious hacker from the Flynn Lives group, who introduces himself as Ram, none other than the program we saw in the very first film. This subtly hints that he might have managed to escape from the grid into the real world.
We have our company back.
Sign me up, Tron.
Good to have you back, Ram.
Hidden secrets in the code. The world of Tron was full of hidden details, some playful, others profound. In one scene inside the control tower, if you look closely, you'll find a familiar shape tucked among the system's graphics. Classic Mickey Mouse. In the MCP's internal map, a yellow circle travels through the grid. Pac-Man, perhaps dodging ghosts. Or maybe digital firewalls. Within Encom's directory, several files carry inside jokes, some named after the very creators of the film. Steven Lisberger, the visionary behind Tron, even hides himself within his creation. Lisberger gradually stepped away from the spotlight, but his legacy never faded. Steven Lisberger didn't make many films, but with Tron, he laid the foundation for digital cinema long before Hollywood even knew it needed one. Tron was more than a film. It was a prophecy, a vector dream in an analog age. Because in a world ruled by programs, sometimes it takes a visionary to rewrite the system. If you enjoyed the video, I invite you to subscribe and give it a like. For a more detailed summary of Tron, you can check out the reviews on the channel. See you in the next video.